From a highly secure network of top secret locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider March edition. I'm your host, Mike Finger, joined as always by Express News Spurs beat writer Tom Orsborn, with sports editor Nick Talbot, and the irrepressible, effusive Jeff McDonald, who overcame obstacles, adversity, all kinds of issues to make it to a different undisclosed location this morning to join us. Jeff, showing the spirit of the team you cover, showing the can-do attitude in the face of just all kinds of negativity. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. I noticed you went out of your way to introduce me last. Appreciate it.
Well, because I had something to I stumbled there, as I often
I'm going to choose to believe it's going to be like, they announced the starting lineup. They saved the best for last, the most popular for last.
Exactly.
When Victor Wembanyama's healthy, they introduced Victor Wembanyama last. So,
Well, you sound great on the podcast. So nice of you to be here. I know it was not an easy thing for you. And on that note, the things have not been easy for the local Cagers lately. They're sticking with it. They gave you a stirring, rousing victory to cover in Memphis over the weekend, but then back to the usual trend of letting games slip away down the stretch against the Oklahoma City Thunder after letting that happen twice in New Orleans. Just what is the state of your Spurs here in the first week of March, Jeff McDonald?
Those are two different animals, right? Like losing a lead against New Orleans and losing the lead on the second night of a back-to-back against the best team in the West. Like, I don't know. I don't know if we ding them too much for losing to Oklahoma City, because I remember sitting around the press room in Memphis going, they're going to lose by like 35 tomorrow. So the fact that they were actually in that thing for so long is I'm not going to say impressive, but it was more than I expected.
Really game effort.
Right. I think they just shot the lights out, and that's what kept them in the game for a while against Oklahoma City. What is the state of the Spurs? They're just we're just I don't want to say playing out the string, but we're just kind of winding down here. Like, there's nothing really to play for since Victor's been out. They're not going to make a play and run. Probably the front office wouldn't mind seeing a few losses to enhance those lottery odds. We're probably watching Atlanta to see how badly they fall and what that lottery pick looks like. But other than that, I don't know that you can judge a whole lot. I mean, we're seeing some players play really well. We're going to talk about Stephon Castle later and what his bounce back has looked like. But as far as the state of the team, it's hard to judge what a team is supposed to look like when the centerpiece is in street clothes for the rest of the year.
I do want to mention the tanking thing, which has been a recurring theme on this podcast going back several years. This year, it's a lot harder to tank with both picks that the Spurs have, theirs and Atlanta's. Like Atlanta, they're not good. They've lost Jalen Johnson for the year to an injury, but they're still going to make the play in the East because someone has to. Like that pick isn't going to be as great as I guess the odds for that pick isn't going to be as great as you might have hoped it would be. The Spurs are kind of in a spot right now where Portland has passed them, but then making that next drop is probably not going to happen. So I think as much as fans like to talk this time of year about tanking and what have you, like it seems pretty clear that the Spurs are going to have two of those picks lottery odds wise in that like 8 to 12 range. That's where both the Spurs and Hawks picks are going to end up. If something crazy happens, maybe he gets to 7 or on one end, 14 on the other. But I don't think that unlike a couple of years ago, the Victor tanking year, there's not this nightly, if you lose, you maximize your odds type of deal. I think that's just kind of going to happen naturally, as it has before.
I mean, I don't even like the term tanking. Like, they're just going to go out and play with this pretty mediocre team, and they're going to lose a ton of games.
Right. Exactly.
Like, well,
But
trying to
I
lose.
don't think it's going to change the lottery ball mix too much. They kind of have their combinations. Those combinations going to remain the same. We're recording this on Tuesday morning, the night of a game against the Brooklyn Nets, who right now have more lottery ball combinations than the Spurs do. And the outcome of this game is probably not going to affect much either way. And that's fine. That's a good way to kind of spend the last 6-7 weeks of the season, is not freaking out one way or the other. A win isn't going to hurt your odds too much. A loss isn't going to make you feel too sad, I don't think, either way. There is some fun stuff in the middle of this, unlike a couple of years ago when we were watching guys who probably didn't have a long-term future with the Spurs. There were guys who were kind of space fillers. You didn't know what was going to happen if they won the Victor Wembanyama lottery or not. Now, with De'Aaron Fox, with Stephon Castle, with Jeremy Sochan, with Devin Vassell, you have guys who are going to be part of what the Spurs become in coming years. And there is, Tom, some reason for optimism about that, especially with the clear-cut favorite, as Tom Orsborn mentioned months ago, for Rookie of the Year, Stephon Castle.
Yeah. And the neat thing about this 32-point performance against the Thunder, we saw two aspects of his game that haven't been, one that was supposed to be a weakness. He hits a season high 4 3-pointers, and then they challenged him to rebound, and he ends up with 8, which is one shy of his season high. So, it was kind of a snapshot of what they anticipate seeing from him down the road when everything comes together. As we've said before, it's going to be pretty darn good, this Stephon Castle. And
Yeah.
we got a good glimpse of that the other night.
It's such a it's not what you talk about when you talk about Stephon Castle, the 3-point shot. And it's still, I think he's still below 30% for the year.
Yes.
But it's so much more of a confident stroke than it was a couple months ago. And talking about it after the game, he said that he doesn't feel more confident necessarily. He's always felt confident. But it seems like the arena is more confident when he shoots now, because it just looks like it's going in. And I'll also give him some credit for so many guys in this league. And Jeff and Tom, you guys have covered this league a long time. And you know what it's like when a guy grabs a rebound or gets the ball at half court or farther away, and those last couple of seconds are ticking off the clock at the end of a quarter, and you see guys hold on to it just a little bit longer than they need to make sure they throw that heave after the buzzer so they don't get dinged for that miss. Stephon Castle's trying to improve his 3-point percentage. He's trying to show that he can do it, and he missed 2 of them at the end of the first quarter and the end of the second quarter the other night. But he made the genuine effort to get them off before the buzzer. They were like 60-foot shots, so in a way, like it dings his percentage. But he's trying to win.
He's been doing that since day one. I bet he leads the team in end of quarter, like 3/4 court heaves. And maybe if he doesn't try any of those, maybe he is over 30%. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. Like we could probably do the math on it and look it up if we had that kind of
I'm not gonna do that
effort.
Break.
But yeah, like I think as an aside, I don't think those attempts should count as your percentage. Like that doesn't tell you, if the percentage tells you a story, if it's supposed to give you a gauge of how good of a shooter somebody is, like those aren't really 3-point attempts when you heave them from over half court.
So the ones that go in, do you not count those as attempts either?
Well, that's therein lies the rub. I don't have solutions for everything in this world on this podcast. I'm sorry, Jeff, as much as I would like to. Did you want to add anything, Jeff, on Stephon Castle, aside from the trivial nonsense about his half-court heaves that I interjected there?
Well, I would just go back to what you just said. I think it's probably a good rule of thumb for those of us that consider ourselves leaders of society, that if you don't have solutions for things, you shouldn't tinker with things.
I agree.
Just leave things alone. How about Steph? I think I think we pretty much covered it. Like I guess one thing that's interesting to me is I think, was it just a week ago we were on here talking about what's wrong with Steph Castle coming out of the All-Star break, and
Yeah.
that swoon didn't last very long. I think he figured it out. He's got 3 straight games over 20 points. He's looked really good. Doing really well drawing fouls for rookie. He's getting a lot of foul calls now for rookie. Probably not even as many as he deserves, but he's doing well getting to the foul line, which I think is going to be a huge part of his game going forward. So a lot to like there.
Also,
and he's got Chris Paul helping him out every step of the way.
Yeah.
Doing Chris Paul
good
things.
segue there, Tom, because he thrives, as he has in several stretches this year. He's been thriving in his bench role, getting quality minutes, I believe, in the back-to-back at Memphis, at home against Oklahoma City. He was over 30 minutes in both of those games. I believe he played more minutes than Chris Paul in both of those games. So, again, it's a podcasty, internet-y type of ruckus that's out there about should Stephon Castle be starting over Chris Paul? I don't think it's really that relevant. Stephon Castle has been really good as a starter. He's been really good off the bench. He's getting his minutes either way, and I think that's fine. I don't want to dedicate a whole segment to that same tired argument when I don't think it really matters.
It does not matter at all at this point of the year.
Yeah,
and what's at stake.
One thing I'll point out, I think I've mentioned this before, but when Stephon Castle comes off the bench, he has an opportunity to kind of run the show when Chris Paul and De'Aaron Fox are out. And even if the Spurs don't see him as a long-term starting point guard, I think that suits him to have those minutes where he's kind of initiating the offense and getting those reps. I think that's a good thing. And I think that's one of the positives of bringing him off the bench, is when he does take the floor and Paul and Fox are out, he is running the show. And I think that will pay off long-term in a way like it did not pay off long-term to have Jeremy Sochan do that last year, right? Like that was a failed experiment, but the Castle thing I think could be great for him. And he's just, like Jeff said, you're sort of playing out the string here. These games aren't going to be the most compelling NBA games in history over the last 6 weeks, but that's a fun thing to watch, as is De'Aaron Fox. And talking to Mitch Johnson before the Oklahoma City game, or I guess after the Oklahoma City game, about the way that De'Aaron Fox's role on this team is going to evolve. He said he's still a new guy, and it would have evolved if Victor Wembanyama was still around. It's certainly going to evolve now, and just I think watching the way the Spurs are figuring out ways to use him to best use that speed and that clutch gene, which Jeff can talk about, and in the shot he hit against Memphis, I think that's going to be a fun thing to watch too.
Yeah, the shot against Memphis, my favorite part of that actually happened 2 possessions before. In Memphis, we're on the floor. It's one of the few arenas left where they still have media on the floor, where you can like hear things and see things that you might not be able to see from like the mezzanine level. And Chris Paul is not closing that game. He's not in the game. He's on the bench, except he's not on the bench. He's standing up and coaching like through the whole end of that game. Like Chris Paul and Mitch Johnson are both on their feet coaching guys. And there was a possession, the Spurs are just holding on for dear life in that game going down the stretch against Memphis. They have not scored a field goal in like 5 minutes, and they just need one to kind of hold off this last charge from the Grizzlies. And there was a possession, about 2 possessions before the end, where Devin Vassell tried to make that shot, and he took some turnaround fadeaway that airballed. And when the game goes back to the other end, the Grizzlies have the ball. Chris Paul is off the bench. He's come all the way to midcourt, standing right in front of us, and he's yelling at De'Aaron Fox, who is at the opposite corner, so about as far away as you can be. And he's yelling, Fox, go get the ball. So you can take that how you want. I'll say it's confidence in De'Aaron Fox, but it was kind of, to me, it was like, why is anybody but De'Aaron Fox running the show right now? And sure enough, De'Aaron went and got the ball in the next possession and took a quick three, I think, and missed. But the next time it came down to De'Aaron with the ball. And what was interesting about the last possession was, and the Spurs had talked about this in the huddle, De'Aaron said, like they knew they were going to double team Fox because of course you do. He's the only guy really that can really beat you in that situation. So the Grizzlies come to double team, gives it to Vassell. Instead of Vassell going nuts with it, he gives it right back to De'Aaron, who outruns the second double team to get to a spot and make the shot. So like all of that was just fascinating to me to watch it unfold, 10 feet in front of me. And shout out to the Memphis Grizzlies for giving us that chance to sit close enough to see that stuff.
I got to make an admission in the middle of that story when you were quoting Chris Paul and screaming, starting the thing that he screamed. I thought we were going to have our producer Monty Bach have to come in here and bleep some stuff or change our rating to MA or one of those things. I thought this was about to become an adult podcast.
I have no idea.
But he was saying Fox. I see.
Yes.
I
have you noticed Chris calls him by his last name? Everybody else in the league has some sort of nickname, or you use their initials or a shortened version of their name, or you add a TY to the end, like Matty. They just call it De'Aaron Fox.
Not Foxy.
Not Foxy. Yeah, Foxy would be one that they would use, but no, it's Fox.
Uh-huh.
That's another odd thing to me.
Another neat thing about that, Foxy Fox. That game against Memphis came 2 nights after he really had a bad closing stretch in New Orleans. He finished with 6 turnovers. Last 3 minutes, he has 3 turnovers and a missed 3. It's just neat how these guys, in that position can just have that short memory, put it behind them and come out and get the job done the next night or a few nights later.
And it's going to be harder for him in those situations, as with everybody, when Victor's not there.
Yeah,
like having Victor as a threat, like you can just load up on De'Aaron Fox in those situations. The fact that he gets it done at all in this situation, any amount of times is pretty impressive.
And just think about his last month. He'd played in Sacramento for a long time, enjoyed it there, had one really, really great year there as a player and as a team where their light the beam thing became a phenomenon, and they had their first playoff run in forever, and he asks out basically and gets to go to the place where he wanted to go. And he's on the road for a month because he was on a road trip with the Kings that led directly into the rodeo road trip with the Spurs. And before he ever gets to play his first game in his new home, the home that he chose, one of the main reasons why he chose this new home is now out for the season. I'm not saying this is a hardship or this is like he merits any sympathy or anything like that, but that's got to be kind of wild to have asked to come to a place and then immediately like that place endures what the Spurs did with the Victor Wembanyama situation. I'm sure. I guess is a long way of saying I'm sure his head has been spinning, and we've sort of asked him about that, and he's tried not to make it about him, and he's been very positive about all this. He's here for the long term. He's where he wanted to be, but God, what a month February was for that guy.
Yeah, they had that one. The Spurs had that one day home in between Houston and Memphis on the rodeo trip. Like they got to come home for a night, and De'Aaron used that to move into his house.
Right.
Like he'd been on the team for weeks, but that was move-in day. Like the U-Hauls show up at his house in San Antonio, and that's just been kind of the whirlwind it's been for that dude. And I kind of had that thought as you watched him maybe not look so great in some of these games on the rodeo trip. He must just be exhausted.
Yeah.
Like it just must. And again, it's basketball exhaustion. It's not real world hardship, but just like mentally and physically exhausted. And so it's not surprising if he has a poor shooting night or, an off game. It's just,
and then more to come. he's going back to Sacramento for the first time since the trade for Friday's game. He's bracing himself for, maybe an uneven welcome, some booze. But
Yeah.
to back to Mike's point about a positive Fox, he said, we don't care about bitter people.
We don't care about bitter people.
If they boo, they boo. We don't care about bitter people.
He was looking right at Tom when he said that. I found that weird.
Well, because I asked a question.
I don't know. I think he looked away and then he looked back and said, "We don't care about bitter people."
Boy,
This is gonna. I'm just trying to feed the. I'm trying to feed the internet conspiracy theorists about how much we dislike each other.
But you're failing to mention you were sitting behind me.
That's true too.
He was looking right at you.
I see. Well, I tell you what, if there is acrimony, if there is negativity going on, I think the person who will come in and be a peacemaker, the new peacemaker for the San Antonio Spurs, the local Cagers, the guy who settles things down, is one Jeremy Sochan, who did it again on Sunday night. He got a technical, which he insists, Tom, that he did not deserve.
Mm-hmm.
But when a fracas broke out, 3 people got ejected, and Jeremy mentions he just ran over to see what was going on, and that was kind of interesting for a while.
They went to him like a magnet. It was incredible.
Yeah.
They try. He gets within the vicinity, and everyone rushes to him like a magnet.
He's been a little better. He had, I think he shot 7 and 9, 17 points in that Oklahoma City game. We've sort of been figuring out what Jeremy Sochan is as an NBA player, and it's a useful guy. Probably not an all-star at any point in his career. I'm not going to rule that out completely, but he's finding a role, and he's been put in a bit of a tough spot with Victor out. The Spurs have been playing 9 guys, including only one center, Bismack Biyombo, who, by the way, was signed to a contract for the rest of the season after performing admirably with his 2 10-day deals. But Jeremy's kind of having to be the big man out there in really small lineups against some big teams. And the Spurs continue to be sort of overwhelmed on the glass. And that's probably not going to change over the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's been a Mitch Johnson kind of part of his stump speech before almost every game. You hear him talk about this. That's just something that's the rebounding, the size. That's just something that's going to be an issue every night for the rest of the year. And if they're going to overcome it, it's going to be this gang rebounding mentality. But sometimes you can't overcome just everybody on your team is 6'6".
Yeah,
like you can want it, you can try as hard as you want, but like teams with any kind of size have the potential to give the Spurs problems, which is a little why I was surprised they were able to win that game in Memphis, because that team was freaking huge. They're just a huge team. Like Bismack Biyombo is the starting center for the Spurs, I guess, and Jaren Jackson just dwarfs him. And then they bring in Zach Edey, who dwarfs everyone, and it was just so that was an admirable win for them. But it's going to be a night tonight issue for the Spurs, and a lot of it is on Jeremy. Little poor Jeremy having to play kind of. You talked about him playing out of position at point guard last year. Now he's kind of out of position by necessity, playing like that second team center role. And at some point, it would be nice for him just to get to be what he is and not have to do all these extra things.
Well, he's been. I've been impressed with his attitude all season long. Kudos to him. And that I should mention that little mix up that the Spurs and Thunder had the other night. We did not get we got a good explanation at the scores table from who was the official, Tom, James Williams, who explained everything very well. But in the NBA, I want to let our listeners in on some behind the scenes stuff. Every night there's what's called a pool reporter who has the option of if necessary to go to the officials afterwards for further clarification. And on that night, the assigned pool reporter by the league was Tom Orsborn. And I'm sorry to put your business out there, Tom, but it's a great story. There was a question during that game: do we need a pool report here on this little mix-up, which really wasn't that big of a deal? Do we need
What's
more
a pool report?
clarification? Well, I just said it's the guy who goes and talks to the officials, asks a question about a call that needs more clarification. And so that wasn't that big of a deal, but we kind of like to bust Tom's chops when he's a pool reporter saying you need to go talk to the officials. And Tom very seriously says, we do not need a pool report. There's more important things in the world. Like what in the world happened to Gene Hackman? And so, yeah, that's good perspective. I sort of wanted Tom to ask the officials for their theory on what happened to Gene Hackman. But anyway.
Well, James Williams would have had a great, no matter what the answer would have been, he would have delivered it really well. I mean,
He would have broken it down.
Yeah. And, you know, you got to make.
You have no theories on that, Tom?
You got to make.
I know this isn't a true crime podcast, but Gene Hackman meant a lot.
It should be.
Gene Hackman meant a lot to everybody on this podcast. Just brilliant performances throughout his career, and it is a pertinent question, I think.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about him last night. You know, there's been so many. You can just pick so many great films and so many great roles, so many great performances. But I was thinking of Get Shorty last night too. I loved his performance in Get Shorty. It's not one that, you know, jumps out right away, but you know, it came to mind last night. So anyway,
I should have had that pool report.
Yeah. Well, you got to make decisions, Mike. Number one, no one requested one to me. And number two, I had things to do after the game that I deemed a little more important. But
takeaways, the triple take.
Yeah, and talking to Fox about his return to Sacramento and so forth. But
I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah,
sound like a hack, man.
But
well, I'll say this: like this is another way that sports reporting, I think trains you to do all kinds of stuff. I think if Tom was on that beat in Santa Fe, trying to find out what happened, I think Tom would do a great job on that. Because of his history as a pool reporter, as uncovering all kinds of stuff in San Antonio sports. I think you'd do a fine job.
Well,
I think a good show would be Tom and James Williams on the road, like figuring out the different crime scenarios. like Buddy
got $1 million idea for a new podcast.
Yeah.
That I'm not sure how to segue from that, but the Spurs do have the Brooklyn Nets after we record this on Tuesday night at Sacramento, as Tom mentioned, on Friday. Then a back-to-back next week at Minnesota. It seems like they have a lot of those back-to-backs involving a home game that sort of lessens the advantage of the home game, right? When you play the home game on the second night of a back-to-back, that's not really a home game. There's another one of those next week at Minnesota at home against Dallas. Don't need, I guess, official predictions anymore because they're sort of irrelevant. But what do you guys see about the week ahead?
I know you just asked about the week ahead. I don't know. We don't like to do long-term things, but a game we were playing at George Paul's last call in Memphis after that game in Memphis was, can the Spurs get to 30 wins this year?
Oh, that's a good podcast topic.
So they need 5 more. I'm going to give you a list of winnable games. You tell me if they can win 5 of them. This is with the rest of the season. Tonight they're playing Brooklyn, which we'll know the answer to that pretty but by the time this is out. They've got home games next week against Charlotte and New Orleans. Those are
also 2 home games against Dallas, who lost everybody.
Yeah, I wasn't going to list them, but with Dallas and the Irving stuff, probably. Yeah. They got a home game against Philadelphia. And then you flash forward to April, and they finish against Toronto at home. I don't know what you think about Phoenix at this point. They do have a game at Phoenix, and they have beaten Phoenix without Victor Wembanyama, and Phoenix seems to be circling the drain. So maybe that's a winnable one. But can you see them winning 5 of those?
Well, I think they're going to win 5 more. And I think they're probably going to win one that you didn't like. There's always one that you
Possible.
like. Who would have seen the at Memphis thing happening? Like that's not.
They actually have 2 games
you-
against Toronto as well. Both games against Toronto are coming up. So
and they go to like at Portland. Like I think they're going to get to 30.
it's interesting because they do.
It's a
pop
fun
off.
question.
They do pop off and win games like at Memphis, but then they'll lose 2 in a row to New Orleans. Like they're capable of losing any game that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And if you remember the last 2 years, the quote unquote tank years, which weren't really tank years, in both of those seasons, they played some of their best basketball in March and April, right? Like they were playing pretty well, winning some. What was the game? The Devontae Graham hero game against the Nuggets that like screwed the Nuggets at the end of the regular season last year. Like they're always good for 1 or 2 of those. I think the 30 is going to happen. Now getting to 32 or 33, not sure, but I would feel pretty comfortable about them getting to 30.
Well, if they win 30 this year, given that Victor will have missed like a third of the season, I think you gotta. I don't want to say give them kudos, but that feels like progress.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's progress. Sure. Tom, anything you're looking forward to this week aside from true crime investigations?
Yeah, Sacramento. It's one of my favorite venues to watch a game. I like the arena. That'll be fun seeing Fox go back. Harrison Barnes go back. So that'll be fun. Yeah.
You know what they like in Sacramento is the salt on their chocolate chip cookies. I don't get it at all. They're so proud of their chocolate chip cookies, and they're fine. They're fine chocolate. They're fine chocolate. They're fine. They're fine chocolate. They're fine chocolate chip cookies, but they're not worth hanging your hat on. I just want to put that out there. I really want to cause a beef with Sacramento.
James Williams, by the way, looking at his bio here on NBA Referees Association.net, has a bachelor's degree from Purdue in law and society and history.
There you go.
That does not surprise me at all.
He lists one of his hobbies as movies, listing The Shawshank Redemption as his favorite movie. So I think he's well suited to be paired with me on this investigative piece.
You should, if you would have done the dang pool report, you could have established a rapport.
I know.
And started this.
That was a missed out.
So worried about your dang triple take.
Yeah.
And your Sacramento advance that you missed out on the chance to start this podcast.
That's true.
Shoot, it could be an HBO long form documentary.
Yeah.
Tom Orsborn and James Williams traveling the country, getting to the bottom of stuff. I want to see that.
I think the homework for the week should be someone come up with a name for this podcast. Something and something. Like it's 2 guys' names, but like nicknames kind of things, like Cagney and Lacey or whatever.
Yeah, I think it would need to be better than that. But
that's your homework for the week.
Okay,
better name for that.
In the meantime, the best way to read Tom Orsborn and Jeff McDonald, and occasionally the host of this podcast, is expressnews.com. Get on that. Sign up for the Spurs Nation newsletter. We got the Spurs subtext, which I don't have the number on me right now, but probably could be mentioned in the notes for this show. That's still a thing. We still have all that coverage going. Triple takes after the games from Tom and Jeff. Appreciate you reading that. And yeah, keep just do what you can do the next week. And until then, until we see you next time, take care of each other and keep it real.